Britain prepare for war? 0207 862 2222, that's the number you'll need. And here's why. Because the government has announced we'll be buying fighter jets capable of firing tactical nuclear weapons for the first time since the Cold War. And the government's national security strategy has warned that the UK has to actively prepare for potential wartime scenarios in our own homeland for the first time in many years. The review says the government will run drills to test our whole-of-society preparedness, the first being a pandemic drill in the autumn. They'll also improve security around critical national infrastructure like power stations and water supplies, part of what's being called home defence. Keir Starmer also pledged to meet new NATO targets of 5% of the UK's GDP on national security by 2035. But are we right? Is it necessary? Should we be preparing for war? It's a sobering thought, Carole, isn't it?
Absolutely. Of course we should be preparing for war. You know, we should have learned from past decades that the international security situation can change in a second. We've seen it with what happened in Iran. Iran didn't know that was coming. We've seen what's happened with Russia of late here. You know, they've committed crimes on our soil. You know, I don't think war with Russia is imminent. However, it would be criminal if we weren't prepared for it. And we really aren't prepared for it. You know, our armed forces now, they're the worst they've been since the Napoleonic Wars. 73,000 soldiers is all we have. We have a shortage of equipment, of planes and everything. And
when you say they're the worst, just to be clear, I mean, you know, I should declare my interest. I'm an honorary colonel in the Royal Corps of Army Musicians. We are.
When I say they're the worst, OK, not worst, understaffed, bad numbers. You know, the Public Accounts Committee has warned that the MOD budget and what we need for our military capabilities, the gap in both of those two things is 17 billion quid. It has never been higher. So we're not even close to being able to prepare for war. So the 73,000 soldiers that we have wouldn't stand a chance. There's just not enough of them.
Carole, why 5% for you?
What?
Why is 5% the figure that we're going for to increase the GDP?
Well, we're not going for it, are we? Because he's promised it by 2035. He won't be in power by 2029. He'll be out. So this is Starmer again lying. If he was serious about defence, and this is all grandstanding at the NATO conference. He's ordered 12 new RAF jets, and he's saying that he's going to commit 5% by 20.
That's a lot of money there. But Radzi's asking, I think, an important question. But it's really one for you to answer because you're clearly sceptical about it.
Yeah.
I mean, NATO. Really at the behest of Donald Trump and also Mark Rutte, who runs NATO, said, look, if you're serious about the new global reality, threats from China, threats from Russia, you need to pay the bill. It can't be for America to defend the world, right? And so it's got to go up to 5% of GDP. You seem sceptical that that's a worthwhile way or worthwhile use of public money.
Well, my question is very simple. It's where's the evidence? Why not 4.8%? Why not 5.2%? What is it specifically about this magic number that we're saying that all NATO members, if they pay, will all of a sudden be safe?
Well, the answer to that comes from NATO itself. But just have a listen to this. It may or may not change your mind. It's another part of Trump's exchange with the NATO chief, Mark Rutte. He went on to talk about NATO members agreeing to spend this 5% of GDP on defence. And this is what the head of NATO wrote in the second part of that tweet to President Trump. You are flying into another big success in The Hague this evening. It was not easy, but we've got them all signed to 5%. Donald, you've driven us to a new really, really important moment for America and Europe and the world. And you will achieve something no American president in decades could get done. Europe is going to pay in a big way, as they should, and it will be your win. Now, just to be clear, Radzi, the reason for that is because Rutte, the head of NATO, has been very clear about what he says are the new threats to the world, the new alliances in China and Russia. Russia's aggressive invasion on Europe's border, for example, in Ukraine being but one example of that.
Yeah, the question is then, when does a threat become an imminent threat? In 2014, in the annexation of Crimea, we didn't suddenly say that we need this 5% magical figure. There's an escalation risk that if we all of a sudden decide to prepare ourselves for war, which who knows what that means, because I know I'm not preparing myself for war. I don't think anyone on this table is preparing themselves for war. But whatever this existential risk is, apparently we should be doing that. But there's a potential multiplier effect of that, the economic cost as well. And for me, diplomacy should come first.
But it doesn't work. We see that it doesn't work. Diplomacy doesn't work with Putin. It's like, it's like you've got your head in your sand and you think it's never going to happen. Do you think World War II could never happen again? Because we've seen it. We've got a hand-to-hand war being fought in Ukraine right at this moment. You're lucky you don't live there. But you have to be prepared for that happening here. So you can't just decide in 20 years' time you're going to spend the money. You've got to do it now and be prepared.
If we're talking about cyber security, then we can start getting serious because it's 2025. No. It's not boots on the ground, 1945.
Before the Ukraine war started, people like yourself, Radzi, were saying, we're never going to have a hand-to-hand war again. It's never going to be hand-to-hand fighting in the field. It's going to be cyber war. It's not. It's hand-to-hand. It's hand-to-hand in Palestine, in Israel. It's hand-to-hand whenever we see a war. So to actually just sit with your head in the sand and think, why are we preparing for a war that may never happen? It may very well happen, and we've seen what's happening.
I wonder, isn't it sort of a mixture of both? And some of this percentage will go to the types of deterrence you're talking about. But it sort of comes back to this idea that if you spend a lot of money on defence, that strength is the best deterrent. There's a moment where Margaret Thatcher, in the middle of the Cold War, says, let's be very clear. She's speaking of the joint session of Congress. It's our strength that brought the Russians to the negotiating table. And you talk about Crimea. I guess the question is that perhaps that 5% leads to a bigger army, which stops further steps by Putin. One wonders if there had been that big, serious NATO presence, whether he would have stepped over the borders into Ukraine. It's a question, isn't it?
It is a question, but for me, jaw's better than war. And I guess I've got more faith in humanity than for us to spend all of our money, and I know it's not all of our money, but a significant proportion when our pensioners could be having the money, when disabled people could be having the money. Why are we once again finding money?
Let's ask what Ian in Wolverhampton has to say about it. Are you happy with this amount of spending on defence? Ian?
Hello, Rob.
Good morning. You're in Wolverhampton. You've heard what Radzi's had to say, that this is just not the right amount of money we should be spending on defence when there are many other immediate social problems in our own country.
But you always have to be prepared. Yeah. That is my view. You always have to be prepared.
Right.
And I'm not saying we should necessarily go to war and go and fight that conflict, but we have to be prepared to protect our own selves.
Right. Ian, just very quickly, mate, you're from Wolverhampton, so am I. When you walk the streets of Whip Marines and we realise how skint people are in places like that, when we walk throughout Wolverhampton, see all the empty units, do you not think to yourself, that is the priority for us?
Ian, very quickly.
No, I see a lot of homeless people on the street, NHS. I agree with all of that. But still, as a nation, I do believe we need to be prepared just in case the worst was to happen.
Well, thanks very much, Ian, for your call, and thanks to everybody for your calls on this later. I'm going to go first of all to you, Christine, in Hampshire. Is it time to prepare for the worst?
Oh, good morning. No, definitely not. I'm quite ashamed of being British at the moment. All this sabre-rattling, it's a marvellous smokescreen to hide all our social problems in this country. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. We're supposed to be a Christian country, but unfortunately, we're not. Britain loves war. We've always gone to war. I mean, people forget that we declared war on Germany twice, not the other way round. And I hope that young people today...
So just to be clear, I mean, as far as you're concerned, that Britain has got a tradition and a history of warmongering. They declared war on Germany in the Second World War. If you'd been around then, 1939, you would have been out protesting against that?
Probably, yes.
What do you think, Christine? What do you think would happen if we got attacked? Do you think that's all right for us to just be sitting ducks and not have the weaponry to protect ourselves?
But nobody wants to attack us. It's all a smoke
nonsense.
screen.
Russia is currently attacking us on British soil. It has sent people here to kill people. It also interferes with our social media. It interferes. We hear all the time that they're planning to interfere with our energy. That is a different kind of attack. So you think we should all just let that happen, yeah? And say a prayer.
Do you really think, Carole, that ordinary families want to go and kill ordinary families in other countries?
You don't have a choice. If someone attacks you, what are you going to do? Just sit there and be killed? Or are you going to protect your country and the civilization that you have?
Because one of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not kill, and we just ignore it at our peril.
So if the 10 Commandments says let's not kill, you're happy to be killed by an aggressor.
Yeah.
Yes,
you
yes,
are.
rather than kill somebody.
Well, I
yes.
think a
Because
lot of
that is
other
what-
people would disagree with that.
Yeah,
with respect.
including quite a few parts of the Bible. I would have thought we'd have time to debate that. You make your point. I have to say it's a slightly surprising one to a lot of people out there. The idea that there aren't really bad people in the world and bad nations that want to destroy the Western way of life and all of the freedoms that our greatest generation died for, most especially what you're referring to in 1939, and that wasn't part of a moral, I use this language, crusade, is a brave position to hold, Christine. You make it clearly, but it's a pretty controversial one, or maybe not. Mark, you're in Cardiff. What do you say, Miles? Is it a good idea? Should we be prepared for, should we be spending money in this way for our defences?
Yes, I agree we should be spending this money. At the end of the day, Russia has shown itself to be very aggressive now. Their capabilities with their long-range missiles, we have to be able to defend against it. We don't have a system like the Iron Dome or anything like that in place. We have very few.
Mark, you sound like you're quite
we need to
experienced. Mark, sorry to interrupt you. You sound like you're quite experienced. Do you have a military background?
I was on British submarines for 23 years. I left about 20 years ago.
Right. So you know a little bit about what you're talking. Why were you prepared to risk your life in that way? And why do you say that more money needs to be spent on our defences, updating the Royal Navy and the Army and our Air Force?
Well, to be honest with you, after the end of the fall of the Cold War, we obviously had the benefit. We were able to reduce our defence spending, and that was beneficial to everybody in the country. But now Russia is gearing up for a major war again. They've invaded the Ukraine, as I say. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania are in great deal of danger. We've got them using the comms lines under the ocean or intercepting them. We've got to be able to fight fire with fire. Yep. If we didn't defend this country, it would only take one submarine off the north coast of Scotland or the Middle Atlantic or whatever, carrying not even nuclear weapons, but standard cruise missiles.
So Mark,
all our infrastructure.
It's strength as a deterrent, and you make that really clear. Now, one of the other things, and I'll go to Heather in Hampshire in a second, we're not talking about here, but it's also about defending infrastructure. Yes. The soft targets, as they're called. Just imagine what would happen if they took out the national grid, the absolute chaos that would ensue. And one of the scenarios that there's going to be run is a testing, if you like, for another pandemic in order to make sure that we're prepared. And that's also because there are threats that are not just about bombs. Of course, yes. There are threats where the civil preparedness is actually absolutely essential, and the army might play a part in that. I'm going to go to you very quickly, Radzi, after I've been to Heather in Hampshire. What's your view? We heard our first caller saying no war at any point, get rid of the army, get rid of the lot. We don't need it because our values are don't kill, and that's what should inform how we are as a country. Heather?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. No, I don't think we should get ready for war again. I think people forget how awful war is and the resulting injuries and troubles that go on for decades after it. My father was a bomber, a navigator, and the effects went on and on and on. It was bad. Anyway, I think America stirred up the world to make it's a big business deal, and they'll stand to make a lot of money from all the arms sales. That's my first point.
Yep.
We've already got a nuclear bomb. I think one should be enough. I think we should stay out of it. We've already wasted money on warships which haven't worked. They scrapped a perfectly good one, and the replacements were useless. No, I think...
Well, Heather, you're bringing in a very important point here where I think a lot of people at home are going to be sitting quietly agreeing with you, even if they don't agree that you shouldn't spend money on defence, that there's a suspicion here, the one that Heather brings out, that actually this isn't really about bolstering a defence. Why do you need any more deterrent when you've got nuclear weapons? This is really about the industrial military complex, as they call it in America, and spending money on defence contracting. And it's about growing the economy by stealth.
Well, I do think, to your previous point, that as we rely increasingly on technology, we become increasingly vulnerable from an infrastructure perspective. When we look at the power cuts that happened in Spain, the things that affected Marks and Spencer's recently, the air traffic control in Heathrow, we rely on things, and when they tumble, we go into disarray very quickly. That, for me, is very scary.
Robert, you're in Northamptonshire. It's been an interesting one. So we're split. There's people saying we shouldn't be spending money in this way. We've got real social problems here. That's where the money should go to. We've already got a nuclear deterrent. We don't need any more cash on our military, regardless of what's happening in the world. Which side are you on, Robert?
I feel that we should prepare for war. It's imperative that we basically stock up, especially not necessarily war on the ground, troops on the ground, but more like you say, infrastructure, the internet going down. And I think the younger generation, especially the millennials, are going to really struggle. I think there's going to be riots, looting, trouble when these things happen. And I think that it's going to be imperative that we do actually do it. But also, I think that the government are continuously making money from the war efforts in Ukraine. Obviously, when our gas and electricity prices go up, they're still making their 20% off of everything that goes up. So I really feel like they don't care about the situation. They just literally want to bleed everybody dry from basically scaremongering. Right. But also, there's another point. If you don't like a country, you expel them from the embassies. You don't allow the Iranian embassy to sit there. You don't allow the Russian embassy to sit in London and have these diplomatic talks at high levels.
Well, that's one way. That's usually a kind of usually a last case scenario. But bringing it back to the central issue, thanks for that, Robert. You know, on the one hand, saying we do want a military. On the other hand, that this is really secretly about investing money. I'll come back to you, Carole, because I want to go to James in Staffordshire. What's your view? Is this money well spent? Should we be preparing for war? Is the reality that we are at risk and our armies are not fit for purpose, James?
Yes, well, I think we should be investing in peace, really. The language we use is probably wrong. When we say, should we prepare for war, it's not really preparing for war that we're doing. We're investing in peace by being prepared for situations that could or could not occur.
That's absolutely spot on, James. You know, Robbie was saying it's money well spent. We haven't spent any money yet, and we're not committed to spending any for the next 10 years, which is lunacy as far as I'm concerned. We've got David Lammy today, who is refusing to reveal the details of a report that's just been released about the dangers that China poses to us as a country. He's refusing to release those details. And why do we think he's doing that? Because they pose a real threat to us. So we have to be aware of the threats and prepare. No one wants a fight, but we want to make sure we're strong enough that people don't attack us, and they know if they do, we can hit back. We don't want to hit back, but we have to be prepared to.
I agree. We need intelligence, and we need the truth, and we need evidence, because then we can actually have a genuine judgment based on information in front of us, rather than prognostication and speculation and ideology. We actually know what's in front of us, and we can make it probable.
To remember the Cold War, and it was terrifying. I remember being at home at night time with my parents, and the news would come on, and we'd all be good because we really thought there was going to be a war. We were terrified, and then we were ready. If that happened again, we're not ready. So if you become a country that has no defences, people will attack you. If you're a country that has defences, they're going to think twice about it because they know you can.
And by the way, that's an interesting point, because a lot of people are saying that actually what America have done to Iran will actually encourage Iran to try and now get a nuclear weapon, because North Korea are not being attacked, and they're not being attacked because they've got a nuclear weapon.
Well, also, just to be clear, I mean, sorry to perhaps respond to your point, North Korea has the largest army in the world. Their people are starving. They invest overwhelming amounts of whatever's left of their GDP in that horrifying state. The reason don't attack them is because they could cross the border with nothing but army. Kenny, you're in Edinburgh. What do you think? Should we be spending this money? Is it time that Britain got serious about defence spending in the way that's being promised?
No, certainly. I agree with what Carole was saying there. The more prepared you are for war, the less chance there is of it ever happening. The guy there on the panel, he referred back to 1945 about being prepared. My father was on guard duty in Hull on the coast, and he had 2 rounds of ammunition. That was it. That's all they had, just between them and, say, the full might of the German Reich if they were going to come over here. 2 bullets. they had plenty of bravado. They were saying, bring it on. But I know it's changed now, but you still need boots on the ground.
Yeah.
The nuclear thing, these planes that we're buying, seemingly, they're geared for tactical nukes. And that we don't have. It's American bombs that we would get to the loads. But the better prepared you are, the less chance there is of it happening.
Well, which is the point of this. It's been an interesting one. On the one hand, it's quite clear that, as you say, Carole, that there is still conventional war. For a long time, it was thought that if there was ever going to be a serious dispute between countries, it would be nuclear. That would be the end of the world. What we see in what they're called theatres of war, people understand that's what you call it, across the world, is that it's hand-to-hand combat or drones, etc. And the reality is there are these new threats. The question is, on the one hand, whether you spend that money on the army or you do it in a way which is going to be more targeted in terms of technologies where we're really at risk.
And just to very quickly say, one of the joys of being here is that we get to hear from the audience. And actually, I thought more people would have been against what's taking place in terms of possibly arming ourselves for a potential war. Really interesting to hear what everyone's got to say about this.
You know what is interesting? Because they're elder people who have either lived through a war or have felt the effects of war, but understand the necessity for it. You know, with respect to you, in terms of your age, you have never been close to a
Absolutely.
war. And you would believe that they're not necessary and that they're, of course, no one wants it, but they happen. And the speed with well, I said earlier, with which international security changes, it could be on us before we know it. Look at Iran; they didn't know that was coming.
In other words, standing up to bully takes the money.
I agree with Carole.
You agree with that?
Yeah.
Winning. Later, it's the papers and everything else. But find out why the NHS will be diverting money from rich areas into working class ones.